Hello, everybody. This is Francesco Rulli. I'm the CEO of Quello. I'm also the Forbes Insights AI Solutions business partner. And I'm here today with Stela Lupushor, who is a senior executive in the HR space, consultant, and also educator at NYU. So, Stella, if you can give us a little bit more information about your background and your current work.
Absolutely. So I have made my mission to humanize the workplace, and I do it in several ways. I work with the conference board. I lead several councils there, so this allows me the opportunity to shape the mindsets and conversations of Fortune 500 leaders. I also consult, and specifically at the intersection of technology, analytics, and human-centered design, all with the purpose of creating a great employee experience. And I also teach, I believe in growing the next generation of leaders and helping them think holistically about employees as a major stakeholder and use the superpowers they have, which is really embracing digital technologies, embracing analytics and insights. It brings, as well as bring that human centricity to the environment that we know and that consumer grade experience.
Fantastic. So, Stella, you have been a mentor to me in the HR space. And as the CEO and founder of an artificial intelligence company, one of the struggles I always have is to find the right stakeholder, right? When you talk about superpowers, I'm thinking, who is the person within an organization who has the superpower to understand, implement, and grow, educate artificial intelligence? Someone that I like to call the cognitive officer. From your perspective, who can be the cognitive officer, starting from an HR perspective and probably expanding in other roles within an enterprise?
Absolutely. And it's interesting just to see the evolution of technology and how the nature and the types of jobs that are starting to emerge, right? There was, at first, it was a chief HR officer. Then as more organizations started embracing analytics, then there was a chief data officer, people analytics leader, chief digital officer. So all of these C-level positions are now emerging that it's helping the organization interact and adopt and embrace this new digitization of our work and consumer experience. What's interesting is now that we are moving towards increased automation and getting more and more comfortable with embedding intelligence, artificial intelligence into the processes, into the way we work, I think it's becoming very obvious that there is a huge space created for a new type of leader, which is focused on the cognitive intelligence or chief cognitive officer. If I was to think about the types of roles and focus this role would have, they really have to be the voice of reason, the role that carries the organizational responsibility and authority to define how humans interact with machines. That's at the simple level, how I would describe it. So what this involves is you really need to have somebody who understands technology well enough and is really well versed in social science, anthropology, and some of the more human aspects of the work environment, and is responsible for design. So first, it has to understand the ethical implications, the bias risks that adoption of technology can have, and the downside and negative disproportionate impact on certain groups that can bring about. It has to understand what explainability is, how to regulate. Just think about how the world of AI was before the COVID, right? There were certain algorithms to build with certain rules. There were certain training data that was used. What will happen now that the COVID has changed the way we work, what matters, the priorities? We have a lot more data, but we have very different types of data. Do we retest the algorithm? Do we retrain it with different rules? Do we scrap all the data altogether and start from scratch? There are a lot of complex questions that are emerging that there's not one particular role or person in an organization who can answer. So you really need to have this cross-sectional type of skill and somebody who is both fluent in digital as well as in the human aspect of technology. The other part of this role is really to educate and raise awareness. Humans, especially HR professionals, have a long way to really grasp the complexity of AI use in organizations and even know what question to ask and what's important to the decision making when you select a tool, when you implement, when you track the performance and the success of that tool, when you think of the monitoring on an ongoing basis of that, as well as the impact on individuals and certain groups, impact on the organizational reputation should the security breaches happen, or should the decisions that were made as a result of algorithm use expose the company in a negative way, and it impacts their brand. And then, of course, the more important part is really a role to bring different groups together to have the right conversations. So you need to have somebody who involves the IT organization, somebody who involves security, who involves HR, who involves legal, who involves space planning. All of these functions in the organizations have to have a common vision and a common view of what success looks like once the technology can be embraced and embedded into our ways of working day in and day out. So for them, it's a really great opportunity to be the intermediator of those conversations.
Very interesting, very interesting. So indeed, in my humble experience going through many different clients and circumstances, one thing I have seen is that identifying the stakeholder who's really curious to learn about the tools available on the market changes completely the perspective. And there is also a little risk of taking failure. So one of the most important things is to experiment different solutions. And when the solution is usually successful, you also have a lot of negative feedback on the knowledge base that you already have in hands, that you're using your FAQs or your policies suddenly become outdated. Taking these into a more creative space, one of my roles is to be the cognitive officer of the Opera of Santa Maria del Fiore, the Cathedral of Florence. When we launched the chatbot of Michelangelo, we saw a lot of personal questions, including questions about his sexual orientation or what he likes to eat, were actually being asked. And ironically, we discovered that back in 1623, Michelangelo wrote some sonnets about a gentleman that he had a very deep love for, and changed the sonnets, the pronouns from masculine to feminine. So something that is happening today happened 600 years ago, right? And let's say no, 600, 400 something. And 455 years after the death of Michelangelo, we're able today to learn about this experience because simply we put ourselves into saying we want to tell his story, but not from the perspective of the experts, the right, let's say the knowledge base, but the perspectives of the questions that in theory could be the employees of a company asking questions that are close to their heart.
Absolutely.
So, Stela, I thank you for your time. It was a fantastic conversation. Let's continue our conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.